What's the most stressful part of buying a business? There are plenty of good answers here. There's a lot that can go wrong. But one of the ones that I see most often is watching your team fall apart. Mergers and acquisitions bring loads of uncertainty, which often leads to productivity tanking, an erosion of culture, and perhaps even your top talent walking out. It's easy to panic or tempting to stick your head into the sand, but both will make things worse. So how do you stop a merger from tearing your team apart and perhaps even turn it into something better? Our guest today has lots of experience in this. Nikki Adams is the Joint Managing Director of the Valorem Group. Under her leadership, Valorem has been celebrated for innovation and excellence, including being finalists for the Accounting Excellence Awards and Zero Awards. She's spent over 30 years turning high-pressure transitions into success stories. And she's led award-winning teams through complex mergers, earning recognition as one of the top 50 women in accounting for 2023. Hear about the bold moves that she's made to keep teams together and the practical strategies that you can use to lead your business through any transition with confidence. Check out episode 150 of the De-Stress Your Business podcast. Welcome to De-Stress Your Business, the podcast where we show you how to get incredible results in your business without constant stress. I'm Alexis Kingsbury, a serial entrepreneur and founder at AirManual, and I'm joined by the brilliant Nikki Adams. Welcome to the podcast, Nikki.
Thank you, Alexis. Thank you. Nice to be here.
Fantastic. Well, you spent decades building a thriving business and supporting others through their own transitions. Mm-hmm. What's perhaps one achievement that you're particularly proud of, and how has it shaped the way in which you've approached mergers and acquisitions?
I think it's really hard to put your finger on one thing. I think when we, just to sort of rewind a bit, I think the reason we started acquiring other businesses was because we had a tax team that we needed to expand the services that we offered. And we realised quite quickly that actually to support a tax team, you need a lot of clients. And therefore, to get that quickly, we needed to go on an acquisition journey. And that probably started seriously 11 years ago. And I think we'd pretty much had a lifestyle business up until that point. Our children were growing up and we got a bit more freedom and decided actually we really wanted to be serious about progressing with the business. And acquisitions, I think when you look at the accounting profession, it takes a long time to build relationships. So what you're doing when you're acquiring is you're actually speeding that process up and you're essentially buying other people's relationships. But I think we're in a numbers business, but actually when it comes to acquisitions, it is all about people. And we have made a mistake on the first one we ever did. And it was all around people. We didn't take enough time. And I hold my hands up and, say that was, my fault, because when you think of it logically, you actually think, yes, I understand that this is a stressful situation for somebody. But when I looked at it, I thought, well, our team, we've got a very happy team in Newport Pagnett, was in those days. And that was we've got about 20, I think, of our own team. And we were acquiring 6 of another. And both sides were thinking that they were protecting their teams, but actually I just didn't give enough consideration to how disruptive it feels to be in that process. And I think since then, we've taken a lot more care over, and it's probably not something that's done traditionally. I don't think when I've looked at other acquisitions, people don't take a lot of time talking to teams before. And I didn't spend enough time preparing our existing team for what was about to happen because I'd never experienced it. So I didn't really know myself what to expect. So it's one of those things that I think you do probably have to expect that you're going to maybe make a mistake because managing people is not an exact science. So you're dealing with a lot of, I think particularly people in the accounting industry tend to be warriors. They're service orientated. They want to provide a good service. And the nature of the work they do means that they are natural warriors anyway. So when you're adding uncertainty into the mix because you can't paint a real picture of what the future looks like for them, that's very scary. And I think that that's the thing that we learned on the first one. So I hold my hands up and take responsibility for that. We learned a lot from it. We now would say when we've done 4 or 5 more since then. And each time what we've said is actually talk to our team first. And that's probably the unusual thing, because we're quite open with what we're doing. That's after you've signed heads and all those things. But I think the sooner that you can start talking to the teams both sides, the better. And that's worked really well since. So I think we can look at it now. And what I'm really proud of is that people that have come through on acquisitions from that have worked for previous companies for 20, 30 years, are now sitting in Ad Valorem with an Ad Valorem t-shirt on, absolutely happy as Larry, and doing it, feeling that it was a good move for them, feeling happy and contented, and they're still managing the same clients they were before the deal. And that's, and that's over a period of years now. So that's what I'm most proud of, is the fact that we've created an environment where we can point to people and say that these people came from this acquisition, these people came from that acquisition. They're all happy. Not to say that everybody is happy on that journey, because what I've tended to find was that when you start those conversations, if somebody doesn't want to come on that journey, they go at the beginning, and that's much better than trying to make something work that just won't work, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, so I think that first one, we did the deal quite quickly. I think after a couple of weeks after having bought it, I just thought, oh my goodness, there was a lot of internal issues there that we didn't know about. And people are not, I think when you're going through a deal process, everyone's putting their best face on. So you don't always know that there's some issues in there that nothing to do with you, but they're just issues that were there before.
Fantastic. Well, I really, there's so much that I love about that, and I want to unpack a few things, because I think one of the things that you said was that it is a learning process, and that the first time you did it, it didn't go completely to plan, and we wouldn't expect the first time we do anything to do so. And you said that as a result, you kind of need to learn from that experience, and you have done. However, in the scheme of things one can do with a business, it's one of the biggest investments of money and time when you're acquiring another business, because it takes a lot of time. Like, it's easily over a year's worth of invested time in terms of selection, evaluation, and getting signing terms and doing all of that, then doing the integration. So it's easily over a year, plus you've got the money and the legal and all that kind of stuff relating to it. So as a result, if we were to look at that and go, okay, how do we help other business leaders and owners out there reduce the chances that they make some of the major mistakes with perhaps their first one or their second one or whatever? Because that's the other risk, is just because you've done one doesn't mean you've experienced all of the risks and mistakes with that first one. So let's dive a little bit into that first one, because you mentioned that there were mistakes, and particularly around the communication and employees. What happened, but particularly what was the impact? Like, how did it show up? What were the symptoms that mean that we look at it and go, yeah, that didn't go as we'd have liked it to?
Well, I think the biggest shock to me was our own team that was already existing, because we had, it was another location. It was the first time that we'd had another location. It took a lot of our attention. So we were having to, spend a lot of time managing what was going on in this other office. And it left us leaving our existing team to fend for themselves, which wasn't ideal. So we've now got a good management structure. So we didn't have that management structure originally. So I think it would be saying that you really need you need to recognize that you need support in that process. So if you've got somebody that's really good with people, I know in the accounting world, it's not always the case in smaller practices. They don't have anybody dedicated to people, which is funny when you think that it is all about people. But you might have one or two people that are good with clients and that are good client facing. But if you're expecting them to do that and try and manage a acquisition process, that's very, very difficult to do, I would say. And, I've been very lucky that obviously Nigel and I run the business together, and I've never really client faced, because I'm working on the business, not working with clients. But at that time, I started doing some work with clients as well. And it was a disaster because, again, you just can't, you need to recognize how much time and investment, as you say, you need to put into that. And it's well worth it. It's how we've scaled so quickly. But I think that's the biggest thing that I would say is that you cannot underestimate that first one in particular, how much time you will need. So if you're someone that's partially client facing, what are you going to do if you've got those priorities where you've got client work to do and you've got a real issue in what's going on in your business? You're always going to have to prioritize your client. So I think it's a very, very difficult thing to do if you're client facing. So we learned that on the first one, that, I couldn't be doing that as well as trying to do the acquisitions as well. So that would be my first thing. And also, as I say, it's that whole thing of preparing both sides for what's about to happen and recognizing that it will be stressful. So, I think in our personal lives, we understand that big life events are stressful. So we almost prepare ourselves. We've got much better at talking about it and preparing ourselves for it. But I think in the business world, we tend to approach things a bit more coldly and say, well, we've just got to get on with it, just got to do it. But again, it's just that recognition that actually this is a big life event for everybody. It's not, it's not just the business owners, it's those people coming along with them. And that applies to both sides of the equation. And I think that's the bit that shocked me, was that I really, you need to have time and you need to make sure you've got a good management structure in your existing business before you even think about adding anything more to the equation. And if you think it's like building a house, if you start building that on a rocky foundation, it makes sense when you think of it. But I think I don't know if it's one of those, I had assumed, I think, that our team were much more secure in their own egos, if you like. I thought they were much more secure than they actually were. And I'd say, why are you worried? Because the immediate reaction was, because people are quite humble, is, they're going to find somebody better than me in that new acquisition. My job's going to be at risk. I think whenever there's a merger or an acquisition, people's immediate reaction, or certainly in what I've found, is, well, I'm going to lose my job somehow. Somehow. Because I think the world tends to think that mergers and acquisitions happen for economies of scale. So that means that somebody's going to be cut in the process. And, we're not idiots. We all, read the press and we see bad things happening with M&A. And so I think that's the thing that I would say in hindsight. I wish I'd just had a bit more of an honest conversation with our team before, or maybe they didn't feel they could, well, maybe they didn't even know that that's how they would feel. I don't know. But that's the experience we had.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because I think you're right that M&A activity particularly has a sort of connection to redundancies and all that kind of stuff. And so as a result, there's a rational fear that a group of employees that are part of a business being bought or part of a team that's then merging with another could feel, because they don't know what the intentions of the leadership are, and particularly because often the process has perhaps come out of nowhere often, because it's like sometimes it has to be secret or whatever. I think it's interesting though that when I think about leaders that I've worked with, I see a very common assumption that employees that feel more secure and are more aware of how much they're valued and appreciated than the reality. And so when I interview employees, often it comes up that, I don't know how much of a good job that they really think I'm doing. And in fact, I've got a particular client in mind where they themselves have recognized, they've been terrible at recognizing good employee performance and reassuring people. Like, this is even before you get down an M&A route, like just along the way, making people feel like you value them and that you think they're doing a good job, and that this particular client previously didn't have a performance review process, didn't have any ways in which they were remembering to provide recognition and encouragement. And it was funny, even talking to the partner of that practice said, oh, but the problem is when I've tried it in the past to thank people, then other people complain that, oh, you never thanked us when we were, working to a deadline. And so it's like, so I stopped doing it, which of course is the opposite way around. It's like, no, you just need to do more of it and communicate this is something you struggle with, and therefore will do better. And fortunately, in their case, that's exactly what they're doing. But I think it doesn't just relate to M&A. I think that that's a common mistake that we all can make as leaders, is to assume that others, particularly our teams, either understand how much we value them and where we see them strategically, or also just more secure in themselves. And the truth is often not that.
I think there's a lot of imposter syndrome there. I think there's and I think when, particularly in accounting practices, I think the whole ethos is for service, isn't it? Is to serve your clients. So they're the people that naturally nice people who don't always recognise their own wonderfulness, if that's the word, and that's the sad thing, I think, in a way. But it did lead us to doing profiling. So again, after that first acquisition, and also the sort of troubles that we had with our management team in the existing business, was how could we have some tool that would help open those conversations and actually look at, so that you could point to someone and say, well, this person is very similar to you. So what we do when we do acquisitions now is we will buddy them together. So, and that's the beauty of having done it a few times, because you can say, well, look, these people have come through the process. They understand how you feel. And they're working at their similar profile type. They've got similar role. Look at them, they've come through that process and are happy. So it got us onto that thing that being much more mindful about personality types, personality profiles, who was likely to be the most stressed, because actually you can see from personality profile and team dynamics who would likely to be quite stressed out by the whole process. And stress is a funny thing, because once you start acknowledging stress, it actually helps. It's like a weird thing that once you say this is going to be a little bit stressful, actually it becomes less stressful. That's a weird thing, I find. But Great. That's what we've done since. So we will do that through the due diligence process. So we will profile the team, or know, or immediately the team, and I go through a bit of an interview process with the team that we're acquiring. And then I can then plan to buddy them with, and I've got HR support now internally. So Charlotte, who's our HR manager, she will do the same thing as well. So they've also got Charlotte now, who supports them through the process. So immediately you've got 2 or 3 people that will know, that they will know as soon as the deal happens. Now I know that's not normal, because quite often, and we've been the other side of the deal process now, having just sold a stake in our business, we've been through on the other side of the equation, and it didn't happen there, because when you get into bigger businesses, it's probably not practical to do. But I think if you're a small practice owner and you're buying smaller practices, this is very easy to do and actually really helps. And that's what enables you to become a sizable practice, where maybe then you don't need to do that, because you just got, you've got size on your side, where the management team, maybe, I don't know, it remains to be seen. We're continuing on our acquisition journey, so it'd be interesting to see as we get bigger whether we can maintain it. But it's certainly been extremely successful for us in the ones that we've done since.
Fantastic. And when we're looking at the sort of setting expectations and helping those employees through the journey, as you say, I like the fact that you describe, actually, in many cases, you're taking a very individual approach. You're using personality profiling and having direct conversations and interviews and so on to build those relationships and to also reduce their concerns and stress. But I assume that also you kind of also have to do some broad communication to make sure that everyone's on the same page, both on your internal team side, but also on the side that you're acquiring or merging with. How soon do you do that communication, and what would you make sure that you include? And to set the tone for everything that follows. Because I see so many business leaders generally, but particularly in this industry, in the accounting industry, where they will err on the side of under communication because they worry about getting it wrong, they worry about upsetting people, they worry about bothering people, and so as a result, the leaders will go, oh well, I just won't send anything, I won't say anything, and of course, people assume the worst when there's a vacuum of that. So, how early do you do that communication, and what does that look like?
So, I mean, as I say, I personally, I prefer to do it as soon as the seller is happy to do that. And it's got to be, they've got to agree to it. And actually, sometimes what have we found as well in a few instances, it actually makes their life easier because they're not hiding anything. I think it's, because we're talking about small teams where actually people know they're not idiots. They think, oh, he's, particularly when somebody's quite has a sort of regimented pattern of how they normally behave, and then all of a sudden they're going out more and they're going and they're having these strange meetings, and people know, and quite often it's because they're retiring, and obviously everyone's looking at age and thinking they're going to be retiring soon, what's going to happen. So for me, it's the sooner that we can have that conversation, the better. And I say we've got some lovely testimonials now from people that have come through an acquisition process that we can, that have said, we stuck to everything we said we would do. And that's the tricky bit, actually, because you need to be quite honest. We had our last acquisition that we did, we knew from day one that we'd have to move them at some point. And I think that, again, going back to the hierarchy of needs, when you're changing someone's work environment, you're going to be changing someone's work environment. Or if, it's better just to be honest and upfront about that and prepare them for it, because there's nothing worse than, pretending everything that you're going to be staying in this office, everything will stay the same. And then 6 months down the line, you don't do that and you have to move them. So I think when we're going through that due diligence process, it's just being honest. And then at that point, if somebody doesn't want to, we've probably had it on each occasion where one person has said, I don't want to do the journey, or I don't want to move, or I don't want to be part of a bigger business. Isn't that an honest, open conversation where it's not going to suit that person for their own personal, needs? So that's a positive outcome to me. What I find as well is that if you get the people part right, the client part follows, because each of the first question a client asks when so going back to communication, we will have the honest, open, and in interview process, if you like, and getting to know us perhaps a month or 2 months before the deal's due to finish. And I think this is where the first one went wrong, because we tried to do the whole thing too quickly. And I think if you're taking 3 or 4 months, that's probably a nice time, because you've got the terms are agreed, you get the numbers bit sorted at the beginning, you start that legal process going through, and if there's anything major, you don't get to the people part. But once you've had that month or whatever, just looking at the numbers and making sure it all looks like it will work, if there's going to be a move, or if there's a strategic reason, or there's a strategic reason you're buying that business, then you can be open and honest about that and show how that fits in with the ad valorem plan for the next 5-10 years. Because the more certainty you can give somebody about what the future is going to look like, the happier they are. And, I would say that's really stood us in good stead, and vice versa. When we've gone through a process, I think our team know that we're honest about stuff. And if it's not, sometimes it's not easy, but if you're just honest and say, well, it's just, this is going to be quite difficult. It's going to be a few months of, uncertainty. We can't quite paint that picture for you, but this is if you trust us, this is the journey we're going on. What the strategic plan is for the business. This is one part of the jigsaw puzzle that will get us there. And I think once you start building that trust, it just stands you in good stead. And it won't suit everybody. And I think you just have to understand that, if someone has been with a business for a period of time and it's a business that they're happy in, and you're going to rock their world by either moving them or changing the dial in some way, let's all be adults and say, well, it's just not going, it's not for everybody.
Fair enough. And for people that are thinking, okay, right, if I'm, I see acquisitions as a route for growth, or maybe they've even got a business or a practice that they're thinking, yeah, this would be a good purchase for me or acquisition. Maybe it's because it's someone that they know who's approaching retirement. I've seen lots of examples of that, but they hear what you've described and they go, oh, that seems like, it's a lot of work that to, have all this conversation with the team and do all the communications and be clear on the strategy and whatever. I only really care about, can't we just get on with it and have 50% more clients than we had before? Let's just paint the picture of when it goes wrong, what's the impact? So you mentioned that the first one, you felt like there were some balls dropped on that one, but also you've done others. When the communication goes wrong, what's the potential impact, or give me some specific examples of things that have happened that you've seen and
so
the impact that has on the process.
So that first one didn't, it didn't deliver the benefits it was supposed to.
So in what sense, like what caused that and why didn't it?
Well, because in the end, we had to close the office. We had to lose the team there. Which then means you lose some of the clients because they were attached to that team. But in the long run, that you have to, because you can feel your own business starting to go backwards. So that's perhaps the mistakes that people don't admit to sometimes, is that actually if it goes wrong, it's not adding to your business, it's actually taking away from your business. So that's what can go wrong. And it is all about people, because the clients, if you've done your due diligence and they're the sorts of clients you want, that's not really that will come. But if you haven't done your people due diligence and you don't, I think it comes from the top as well. I think if you immediately don't relate to the leaders of the business, and this is where I see, I look at some of the aggregators and I see the aggregation going on, and some of it doesn't make sense, but it might do from a numbers point of view, but I'm not sure that it does from people working within those businesses. It'd be interesting to do a bit of a survey on that, but no, perhaps nobody would admit to it. But, I would sit here and admit that we didn't have the management structure in place to take that first leap into acquisitions. So it hurt our business and we had to go backwards. And that means, and unfortunately, in what we do, going backwards means probably people losing jobs. And that's the horrible, harsh reality of a service industry. Because if you look at it and you say, well, I know I've got to do something, I can't carry on like this, you have to make some bold moves. And the bold move for us was, even if we lost that acquisition, what we gained or were hoping to gain from that acquisition, we had to protect what we already had. So it meant going backwards, but what we learned from it has stood us in really good stead going forwards. So I think sometimes you've got to be not afraid to go backwards. And unfortunately that does mean usually people losing jobs, which is not nice.
Indeed. And so I think that paints a really good return on investment for putting the time and the thinking into around that communications and getting the team on board and having that clarity on where does this fit in terms of the strategy and so on. Because I think, a failed acquisition costs a lot of money, both the attempt of the acquisition and then, of course, your lost opportunity cost, as well as potentially your own lost clients and team members.
Do you know the bizarre thing though, Alexis? The bizarre thing about that was I can remember it really clearly, the night we had to make these decisions. And we sat there and said, well, when you look at the core of our business, those clients have bought into us. They are business owners themselves. They know what happens. They know how difficult these things are. They knew some of the personalities. So they knew that we were challenged. And when we went to our clients and the ones that we'd purchased, we did lose some, but we still got clients to this day from 11 years ago that said, well, we completely understand it's business, isn't it? Business is challenging. You have to make tough calls, and you can't let a bad situation carry on. So you have to do something, and it's the hardest thing. And so I would say to the people coming to you and saying it's a lot of time, But can you imagine if you don't do it?
Yeah.
And you take on a bag of problems and your business goes backwards, and then you have to deal with that. And I would say I would much rather be in the other position where I could say, we've gone through this process and actually it's not going to be a good fit. Let's just all back away. And it may have cost you a bit, but actually, isn't that better than taking something on that drags your really good business down? And, we've had, business owners, we've had a load of things thrown at us over the last 4 or 5 years. And it's very tiring to make these decisions, but you're almost better off saying, I'll stay as I am. If you don't have the resources, just stay as you are and be happy with a bit of organic growth. But if you want to go on a growth journey, be very fully aware of what you're going into, and you might well have to make some really tough decisions. And that's what I would say.
I love that. I think particularly because I see a lot of business owners generally, but particularly I've been spending a lot of time in the sort of accounting industry and speaking at accountancy events. And I see examples of practice owners who talk about doing an acquisition as, oh yeah, I think I might like to do a sort of, I think I'll do an acquisition as part of the growth. And in my experience in business, anything significant like that, it has to come with a strategy and a plan and, doing the work and the research. And so, and this particular acquisition's just popped up on my desk and that looks like a good fit. Feels like a terrible way to do an acquisition. The same way as, I've just had a CV sent to me. Yeah, perhaps I could hire them, is a terrible recruitment process. Like, you need more options. You need to go through doing the due diligence and make all those decisions and have that plan. And so I really like that, you've emphasized the need for that, both doing it as part of the deal, but also making sure your existing business is in good shape to be able to do it in terms of your managing structure. Earlier, you talked about making sure that you've even got the time to be able to work on the business, not managing clients and so on, which is something I see really commonly, is that these practice owners and business owners, they're still too stuck in the day-to-day business, in the existing business. Adding another one is not going to help with that. In fact, it's going to make it considerably more challenging. And I really like your point around you're going to have that pain later on if you don't do this. And it reminds me of something a client of ours said when we were talking about documenting processes, like implementing improved process in the business. They said it's a little bit like choosing to be healthy or unhealthy in your practices and living and eating and so on. Like, you can choose to either pay the price for healthy eating now or pay later for the unhealthy choice.
Yeah.
Except that one's far higher. And I think that's the same with this, isn't it? Is you've got to put in that strategy, have the communication, do all those things, do it properly so that it doesn't potentially sink the existing business, never mind the one that you're purchasing.
I think it particularly applies if you're not in a big partnership model, because I think if you're already working existing in a partnership model, you're used to that consensus and you're used to probably people issues and diplomacy. If you're a sole practitioner or if you're a 1 or 2 partner firm and you're used to making all your own decisions and you're used to your autonomy, if you look at the ones that we've bought, tend to be 2 or 3 partner firms that maybe one partner wants to retire, the other wants to stay, or we've had, there's always been a good reason why we've wanted to buy them. So it's not just been, we want to add more fees. There's got to be a reason for it. And because it isn't easy. I think if anybody says it's easy, I'd love to know how they do it. But I think you have to go with your eyes wide open on it. And I think the long tail that we have in smaller firms means that, and I think with the aggregation going on, there's a real temptation for people to jump on that bandwagon and say, I really want to do acquisitions because, I can just see the numbers, I can see the multiples and I can see why that's a good idea to do. But I think when you get into the smaller practices, the sub-million, they're quite hard in terms of, because you're taking people that are used to their autonomy, that their clients are probably very used to the way that practice works. And that's not to say that the practice necessarily needs to look like you, because when I look at the ones that we've done, they're all very different. And a couple of them, you wouldn't automatically have put them with us. But at the heart of it, when I met the people, though, the people just felt like Ad Valorem people.
Mm.
And so it doesn't matter what surroundings, what they look like, it doesn't matter what tech they're using. It does come down to the people, because then you know that if those people are very similar to your people, they'll all get on. And also the clients that they attract are probably the similar type of clients that you attract. So that's the bit I would really caution on is, yes, it's very easy to think of the people part as fluffy and, not necessary. But if you get it wrong, it will hit your numbers. So it's really well worth putting the time in.
Yeah, I really like that. And I think that assumption that it's mainly about, it's, I'm acquiring the business model or the clients, and therefore the team is a secondary concern. I love how you're flipping that and saying, actually, it's the complete other way around. And most of your successful purchases, or indeed possibly all of them, are where you've got that good alignment with the team. And that's interesting, because I think that's completely at odds of a lot of the deals I see, where people they're taking on perhaps another business, another practice, and they're excited because, it's going to add another 200 clients or whatever. And maybe even it's in the right segment for them. Maybe it's our particular vertical industry, but in a different region, and fantastic. But often they'll say something along the lines of, I don't mind if we lose a lot of the people. I don't think they're going to be the right fit. Maybe there's one or two, we'll see. But, whatever. And I think that it's interesting that your approach is exactly the opposite way round, because I agree with you. I think you're absolutely right. Partly in this industry, but also most industries, it's way harder to get amazing team members that are aligned to your cultural fit and can do the job and have got some experience in it. That's really, really hard. I'll often talk on stage about don't hunt unicorns, where you want them to have got 10 years experience in the role and they can use all the tools that you use and they're great at working with clients and got attention to detail and so on. You're hunting unicorns. And yet this is the closest you can get, because you're basically going to acquire people doing the job. The key is making sure in advance that they've got the cultural fit. And then, as you've talked about, making sure that you're taking them on that journey and that you're communicating and handling their stresses and concerns to make sure they actually stay and they become embedded to achieve that. So I love that flip and approach is great. If you could give leaders just one piece of advice about handling employee stress during the merger, what would it be, and what stops most leaders from following it?
I don't know that many have a very clear vision of what they're trying to achieve. So my take on it would be, make sure that you've got you're honest, got a clear vision of what the practice that you're building will look like, and nothing woolly, because people just see through it. So none of this, I'm going to build a 50 million practice in 10 years, whatever. That doesn't really, I think it's what day to day it will happen to that person, and what is the likelihood that their role will change or that they're going to be moved. Just be honest about that, because there's really no point being anything else in my mind. But I don't know that many people have that clarity on the reasons why they're making that acquisition. So we've done it for people, and we've done it because we wanted a specific service line. So we did it for audit. And off the back of it, we know we can build on our other specialisms that those smaller practices don't have.
I really like that, because I think it reminds me of perhaps one of the purest definitions of what is the business leader's responsibility, or particularly the CEO's responsibility, is essentially to define your as is, where are you currently, your current state, and then define where are we trying to be, and then identify the key things that need to happen to go from A to B. And I think that what you're describing is such a brilliant way of looking at how do you give complete clarity on that. And particularly when you were giving those examples of saying, you need to get really clear on what it is that you want. We're adding audit in that example. And I can almost imagine showing that it becomes a good thing for the leader to do, to create the slide, show how you're looking at the business currently, what its service lines are in a very simple way, and then show on the next slide, and this is what it will look like, and this is how audit will fit in. And I see so many leaders shy away from that and think, oh, well, I don't want to get stuck in the detail. And so I was like, no. That is what leadership is about, is understanding what this is going to look like and creating that map. So I really, really like that. It's a fantastic piece of advice. I want to move on to some quick fire questions now. We're looking for one sentence answers where possible.
I'm not very good at one sentences.
Me either. And I'm also really bad at not then reacting to your answer. So this is always the most heavily edited part of any episode.
Right, I'm going to brace myself.
So here we go. What's the best question you've ever been asked?
The best question was, if you could wave a magic wand and offer your customers what you would really like to, not necessarily you have to deliver, what would you offer them?
Really, really good.
So, yeah, and that opened up that's from the Steve Pipe and AVN days of, you've got your existing client bank. What else can you do with those clients? You don't have to deliver it.
Nice.
You find someone that can.
What's one thing that causes the most stress for your clients?
Cash flow.
What's one thing that causes the most stress for you?
HMRC.
What do you enjoy the most in your business?
I love building it. We can't ever imagine stopping it, but just that constant iteration. I've realised over the years I'm one of those people that just reach a goal and then, right, what's the next?
What do you enjoy most in your personal life?
I'm really sad. I love reading business books and strategy. That's what floats my boat, and getting the most out of people. So, but I do like my family as well. So,
oh, by the way, I'm the husband. Oh, God.
They work in the business, so I see them all the time.
Yeah, they're part of that answer then. That's fine. It leads nicely into my next question, which is, what book or podcast has been most pivotal for you in changing your life for the better?
This is really hard because I read a lot, but I would say the thing that really started me off was the loyalty rules, loyalty effect, and just the basic rules around how you get loyalty from your people and customers.
Nice. And what's the one thing you want business leaders to take from this episode?
Treat M&A as a big life event. So as you would with they say big events, having a baby, getting married, getting divorced, you treat that and you expect stress with that. When you're doing M&A, assume that. And weirdly, just having that conversation seems to de-stress it. So I would urge people to go down that line, providing they're good with people, that is.
Love that. And interestingly, and if they're not good with people?
Find someone that is.
Good advice.
You don't have to do it yourself. Go and find somebody that's good.
Fantastic. Well, in the show notes, I'll make sure that we link to your LinkedIn profile and also to the Valorem website, which is advaloremgroup.uk. Is there anything else that we should link to in the show notes?
I think obviously we're part of ETL Global now, so very, very excited about building our global vision. And so if we could put a link in there, that would be great.
Fantastic. Yeah, we'll make sure that we link to them too. Brilliant. Well, thank you so much, Nikki, for joining me. To everyone else, thank you so much for listening. And if you found this episode useful, please do share it on social media, tag Nikki and me in. We'd really, really appreciate it. But otherwise, until next time, have fun.
Thank you. Bye.